On the morning of April 19, 1995, Edie Smith and her two sons, Chase and Colton, ages 2 and 3, started their day just like any other day in their quiet neighborhood in Oklahoma City. Edie dropped the boys off at their daycare center at the federal building and went to work a few blocks away. Little did she know that her ordinary day would turn into her worst nightmare. A rental truck packed with explosives had been parked purposely by an evil person by the name of Timothy McVeigh. In front of the federal building, the Ryder truck exploded at 9 a.m. The explosion was felt and heard miles away. Edie felt the explosion and ran towards the federal building, terrified for the safety of the boys, only to see that the building was crumbled by the explosion. Later that day, Edie's worst fears were confirmed, and the boys died. 168 people died that day, 19 of which were children. On April 23, 1995, our president, Bill Clinton, delivered a speech at a ceremony that took place at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds. We're going to analyze that speech and talk about some main issues of that speech. We're going to talk about the type of ceremony that he used and the makeup of the audience. And then we're going to discuss his ethos and whether he was a good choice for the speech, and also the stylistic choices he had in the speech. And lastly, we will talk about the values that he was trying to appeal to. The first thing we're going to talk about is the type of ceremony that took place and the makeup of the audience that was at the ceremony. The speech was a eulogy. The expectation of a eulogy is to praise and comment positively on the people that died. And it is also to show empathy for the victims' families and friends. President Clinton did this in his speech. Clinton praised and showed respect for those who had died tragically in this accident by speaking of them being hardworking and model citizens. He showed empathy to the families when he read a letter that was addressed to the victims' families and friends that had been sent to him. The letter was written by a widow whose husband died in a tragedy years before. One of the things that it said in the letter was the need to pay tribute to their loved ones by continuing on with the things that they left undone. The memorial service that was at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds was open to the public, and it was on national television. Because it was open to everyone, it wasn't just a normal eulogy in which you would typically have families and friends that attended the eulogy. Instead, there were a lot of people who watched and attended this ceremony. It was people who needed to find solace from the unimaginable tragedies that took place only a few days ago. A lady that was interviewed who attended the ceremony said, "I came home one night and I saw my child sobbing in front of the television. It is hard for us to eat. It is hard for us to sleep. Maybe this will be the beginning of the healing." Now that we've discussed the type of ceremony that took place, as well as the makeup of the audience, we're going to talk about whether President Clinton was a good choice for making this speech. During his first term as president, there were a lot of positives that went on. Unemployment was down, interest rates were going down. He signed significant legislation during his first term that included the Family and Medical Leave Act. There was also a great deal of turmoil. He was accused of being a part of the Whitewater scandal, which led to him going through an impeachment trial. He was also accused of an adulterous relationship with Monica Lewinsky. Even though there was mixed public support, the president was indeed a good choice for this speech. Whenever a national tragedy occurs, the nation has an expectation that the president will step up and be the leader that he needs to be to guide us through these troubling times. President Clinton did that. The Oklahoma Republican governor thought he did that. He was quoted in the Washington Post as saying, "Our president was swift to act. He sent us the resources to solve this terrible crime. He offered condolences and heartfelt assistance of a grieving nation." Now that we've talked about the ethos of President Clinton, we're going to talk about the stylistic choices now that he used for the speech. He created vividness in the speech when he used a personal story. The story was about how he and his wife, Hillary, that morning had planted a tree in memory of the children on the White House grounds. Because a eulogy should speak positively of those who died, the story about planting a tree is a positive and memorable image of the children who lost their lives that day. He created a metaphor in his speech when he said, "A tree takes a long time to grow, and wounds take a long time to heal, but we must begin." This metaphor is used to help the mourners understand that it will require time for the suffering to ease, but it will in time, just as a tree grows in time. Now that we reviewed the stylistic choices, we're now going to talk about the values that he was appealing to. Clinton was appealing to the value that as a nation we must join together and support those who have suffered and remain strong. He also said that we must not let this wrongful crime go unpunished. It was obvious that the audience shared these same values, and we knew that because there were a couple of times during this part in the speech when they applauded and cheered. One of those moments is when he recalled the words of the governor and Mrs. Keating when they had said, "If anybody thinks that Americans are mostly mean and selfish, they ought to come to Oklahoma. If anybody thinks that Americans have lost the capacity for love and caring and courage, they ought to come to Oklahoma." Another moment that they showed support was when he spoke about justice prevailing over these violent acts. These were indeed sound choices for this speech. So in conclusion of the analysis of this speech, we discussed the ceremony that was used and the makeup of the audience. We talked about the ethos of President Clinton, and then he was in fact a good choice for this speech. And then we reviewed some of the stylistic choices he used for this speech. Lastly, we talked about the values that President Clinton was appealing to. This tragic event in which so many innocent adults and children lost their lives deserved a thoughtful and impacting memorial service in which Americans could mourn together. President Clinton was indeed the right person to deliver such a eulogy, and he served America well on April 23, 1995.